This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Jahlil, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. All ready to go, cocked and loaded. And we are definitely into the NBA season. So much stuff to get into, man. A lot of stuff happening. Some great basketball played, especially over the course of this week. I mean, 3 overtime, last-minute game-winning shots, dunks galore. Definitely, NBA is just in full tilt right now. And you just couldn't be a happier NBA fan if you're watching the galore that's happening right now. So let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand. NBA aficionado, my brother who does it like no other, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Mr. Warren Shaw, www.shawsports.net. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Are you getting down and dirty with the NBA like Bradley Beal and Draymond Green did last night, man?
No, I ain't hugging up on nobody just yet.
You love how they were sumo wrestling it, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
like doing the do-si-do, man. So it was very interesting and how they all just kind of collapsed to the ground. But you know, as always, man, susu to all.
That's how
fans,
all mosh
listeners.
pits should happen moving forward. Like when you get into a mosh pit, it should just collapse just like that. You know?
Yeah, just slow.
I just really think they wanted fans to feel a lot more closer to them. You know, they love in the NBA. We love that fan interaction and stuff. So it's nothing like doing roly-poly all up in front of no real fist thrown, but just a lot of hugging.
Yeah, well, Kelly Oubre, you know, do some bows in there and do some. So we'll see some suspensions coming for him likely, but. Nevertheless, as always, salute to all the fans, listeners of NBA Baseline. Another great show, another great week of NBA action. As always, we're going to jump right in. Some fun topics as we get into this NBA early season, man. As always, man, I can't wait to jump right in.
Most definitely. I do have to ask you this one question, Shaw, before we jump right into our show. Tell me what was more savage, though. Was it the Bradley Beal, Draymond Green fight or Greg Popovich doing that WWE headlock on Terrence Ross after that beatdown that the Spurs took?
Anytime you see Pop getting in the action, I think that's probably more interesting.
Listen, don't sleep on that. Listen, my homie went to West Point, very well versed, right? He's been trained in combat. Just don't let the demeanor fool you, man. I think Terrence Ross, took him for played him lightly. Didn't see it coming, man. I'm sure he's watched a lot of what was it back in the day when we were watching wrestling, AWA with the Von Erichs. Put him in that classic Von Erich headlock. Pop had it on lock on him, man.
I would expect nothing less from Pop. At this point, I don't think there's anything he can't do.
He is the real Texas tornado. Forget Kerry Von Erich. Greg Popovich is the real Texas tornado down there. We have got a great show on tap for you, and our concept that we have for the breakdown. It's time for us, Halloween style. We are gonna go trick or treating. My man Shaw went all across the country, went all up and down the NBA gamut, and he selected some players that he wants to put in your grab bag. And we're gonna ask you, and he's obviously gonna ask me. We're gonna ask each other, and we're gonna give our perspective in our rendition of trick or treat with some prospective players that should draw the ire of people as we get into this spooky Halloween edition of the Baseline NBA podcast. And then in our subject of the drop, there's a lot of rumors and talk going down with regards to 2 significant players, one from the Western Conference and one from the Eastern Conference. We won't name those names just yet, but the fact that these guys are actually being thrown out in trade rumors may mean something that I'm sure Shaw wants to point out to you. So definitely that is going to be on our subject of the drop. Once again, we appreciate each and every single person for tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms: iTunes, Player FM, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Google Music, Roku channel. Rolling with our peoples from the Almighty Ballers Network. So be sure to check out the Baseline NBA podcast through Almighty Ballers Radio, giving you the butter goods of all of the hot podcasts that discusses the NBA 24/7. We're also down with 16 Wins a Ring. Great content for your reading pleasure. If you can't listen, you can definitely read. And we ask you to always check out any of those sites. They always give you the good stuff regarding the NBA. Also available on Dash Radio, one of the hottest media platforms that's out there. NBA on Dash Radio. The Baseline NBA podcast is also on there. So get down with any of those platforms and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all of the hot button topics that's happening in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
I break it
down.
down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Jahlil, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week on the breakdown, we're going to add a little theme to the breakdown since they're kind of bringing in the Halloween week, or this is somewhat of us. We're recording this Halloween weekend because most people are partying it up this weekend, and Halloween falls on a weekday, classic, primarily a work day. But we decided to do a little trick-or-treating early. So my man Shaw went gallivanting around, hopefully not on a broomstick, and when started plucking, right? Well, listen, I could have been said you would have, had a witch's hat on and stuff like that. And
I'm a grown man. I ain't on no broomstick, bro.
Bugatti. All right, he went rolling out on his Bugatti, right? And he basically went and plucked out some players that we've been already watching so far through the first quarter of the quarter, within the first 5 games of this NBA season, essentially. Impressive players. But just like Halloween, you might see a nice shiny face and there could be a little ugliness to them when it's clearly revealed. Maybe throw out a few magic spells, and then next thing you know, that princess turns to the ugly witch. So we're going to break this down into 3 different sections, right? Shaw felt it, like he saw it as seeing, we want to get at the bigs, the few bigs that are rolling around right now that we want to do a little trick-or-treating with. We got some guards, and we got a couple of rooks that is well worth the conversation of our trick-or-treat. So let's start with the bigs, Shaw, because you were on them bigs this week, brother, as you were selecting your players. And the first person that comes to mind when we talk about trick-or-treating probably does it better than no other over the last few years is our man Dwight Howard for the Charlotte Hornets. What he's been giving us so far this season and for the Charlotte Hornets, is it trickery or is it a treat for the Hornets fans?
Well, what he's given thus far has definitely been an absolute treat. I think, Clifford and the Hornets couldn't be happier with his initial start, averaging 17.4 rebounds for the first 5 games, almost 15 points a game as well, too. Shooting, 59% from the floor, just doing everything that he does, including poor free throw percentage. Will his rebounding continue at this rate? Will his scoring, be this efficient and that effective? That is really what it comes down to. Is it really going to be a trick or treat for him for the entire season? And I feel like, his rebounding probably is going to have to decline a little bit. 17 rebounds a game through the first 5. And he's not even in the NBA with that. He's third, behind Whiteside and DeAndre Jordan. I think that will dissipate a little bit, but I think we are going to see a continued bounce back season for Dwight Howard. I know we've had some initial conversations about this when we did our season previews, and I think Howard is definitely coming into form, getting 31 minutes a night. I think this is a great opportunity for him in Charlotte, where they know how to utilize him. He understands his role, and I think he's fitting in just nicely. So I'm going to say treat for Dwight Howard. What about you?
Well, I'm going to say that it's a treat, just simply because of the fact that he's not been complaining, right? Like, so this wasn't, we don't know what, his true mindset was about that particular trade. Clearly, I'm sure he was relieved because, he wasn't feeling what was happening to him in Atlanta. But there's clearly a better chemistry that he's building with Kemba Walker. Now, I don't know if it's something that he is inherently recognizing or it's something that is natural, in that process. As you get older, you begin to realize that you have to temper down where your place is, how you are as a player, what kind of impact that you want to make. And really what it is that you're not just telling the team, but also the fans that come out there to see you play. And let's not make any mistake about it. We've always said that, Dwight Howard, is not a has-been. I think the only time that we ever mentioned that is when health problems plague him. But for the most part, over the course of the last year or so, he's been relatively healthy. And I think depending on how Coach Cliff, decides to use him and not overuse him, he can definitely be what the Charlotte Hornets were hoping that Al Jefferson was for them when they were making those runs to try and get into the playoffs, and they did make the playoffs. Can he be an impact player on that team? I think so. I think it's a little maligned that people have this perception that he is the defensive dominant person that he used to be, but he definitely has a presence. And I think the biggest presence that I think can kind of usurp this defensive deficiency that the Charlotte Hornets at times seems to have, even though they've got guys like Batum and Howard, who are at their time were great defensive players. The one thing that I think is important is that they need to rebound the basketball. They have to minimize the other team's opportunities for second chance points, which at times can kill the Charlotte Hornets because they are not the most offensively efficient basketball team. So I'm getting a treat from seeing what I consider a little bit of the old Dwight Howard, not completely, back in the day Dwight Howard, but this is good enough to make the Charlotte Hornets competitive and keep them in pace with a surprising Orlando Magic team, with an already good Washington Wizards team. This Charlotte Hornets team can basically make and exceed their expectations if they're getting this kind of production from Dwight Howard.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. And I think it's obviously very early, so we're not jumping off our rocker here a little bit. But early season indicates that he is helping the defense. They were 14th overall in defensive rating. Currently, as we record, they're 5th in defensive rating. The rebounding is 8th in the league. They were 16th last year. So again, very, 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 very minuscule sample size. But I think Dwight has definitely been a treat for the Charlotte Hornets this season, and I think he's going to continue to be that, having a positive impact all season long.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of other guys here, Shaw. Steven Adams for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Are you tricking or treating on Steven Adams?
I'm treating on this, because what I realized as I watched the OKC Thunder is that you don't realize the supplemental players and the kind of the auxiliary parts, if you will, how they can somehow always be impacted in a positive way. Not having any type of real defensive focus on him is allowing him to really just kind of slip through pick and roll screens and pick and pops, if you will. He's able to focus on rebounding, as the defenses now obviously have to focus on Westbrook, but as well as Carmelo and Paul George. And they're opening up some space for Adams to matriculate down low. And that's great. So I think he's, as we record, 15 points per game, obviously the highest of his career to date. Still a long ways to go before that. 8.4 rebounds. And his minutes are up to 32. So I think all of those things, all those factors, he's 24 years old, just understands the game a little bit better, played with Russ for, multiple seasons now. I think this is going to be a treat for the OKC Thunder all season long, as defenses are, again, they're just not going to be able to focus on Adams, and he's going to be able to do some dirty work down low.
Well, it comes down to the confidence of Billy Donovan and how he uses them, and he has no choice. They no longer have Enes Kanter. And I think maybe in some ways that is what has hampered Billy Donovan's ability to really see what this guy is all about. I've said all along that while that might have been a nice move in getting a player like Enes Kanter who can help deepen the bench, I think it really made it too much of an issue for a guy like Billy Donovan to try and figure out a way to use both of these guys and give them the minutes. Steven Adams is a guy that's got to be on that basketball court, and it doesn't make sense to getting someone who is of the same ilk, just of the opposite spectrum of what his game represents. Meaning Enes Kanter was always about the offense, never about the defense. Steven Adams was always about the defense and very little about the offense. But if you give Steven Adams the requisite minutes that he needs, he will give you career highs right now, which is basically what he's doing across the board. His player efficiency is off the charts right now. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a treat for the Oklahoma City Thunder. The bigger question is how will that have an impact with the components that have been added to this basketball team? Because while this is great, maybe if it was given to us last year, this would have been a much more improved Oklahoma City Thunder team. How he looks and whether or not it still reflects this team struggling to win basketball games like they did the other night against the Minnesota Timberwolves, that to me is going to be the bigger question. And it kind of gets maligned in the whole idea of whether or not Steven Adams' contributions is going to mean anything, because the team is still not getting wins. So it'll be interesting to see. Right now, it's a treat because we talk about the bigs in this kind of way, but it could be somewhat trickery because it may not mean a damn thing if the Oklahoma City Thunder doesn't get W's.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I think the bringing out the point that Kanter is no longer there is obviously a huge thing for them. And I don't think Patrick Patterson has been utilized, and maybe isn't even fully healthy yet, to be utilized in the way that Donovan may be using him towards the end of the season. And Patterson may very well be out there to play small ball 5 in certain lineups out there so that they have more spacing and more shooting. But I do think Adams is going to be a much improved player throughout the entire NBA season. And you're right, you just have to hope it does lead to the wins that we think OKC can get. We think this can be, a 55 to 60 win team very easily. And Adams is going to be a big part of that.
All right, let's go ahead and switch gears, Shaw. Let's head down in South. You know what I'm saying? Let's go in the Popovich land, right? I think that's where the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is. Well, they got a chainsaw massacre going on with LaMarcus Aldridge, man. LMA, man. You know what I'm saying? He got the Leatherhead, you know what I'm saying? And he just basically taking everybody to the shed right now, right? I mean, his game is completely crazy. But that's clearly because Kawhi Leonard, you know what I'm saying, kilowatt, is not on the basketball court. So while all of these numbers look all nice and shiny and glossy and stuff, is this trickery or is this a treat for the San Antonio Spurs?
Yeah, I think this is trickery for me right now.
Oh, we couldn't go 3 in a row. I clearly that was how it was set up, right?
And again, I really appreciate the game of LMA. I've been a fan of his for a while, but I think, you know, I'm not buying into the complete about face that has happened with him and the Spurs this short amount of time. You know, last year they were trying to trade him. Over the summer they're trying to trade him, and all of a sudden they've re-signed him to an extension, and all is good. And Popovich understands that he needs to use him and utilize him better. I think the expanded PER that he has right now and usage rate, obviously that has to go down. Can he average 25 and 9 when LMA is back? I don't think so. You know, I mean, sorry, when Kawhi is back, I don't see that being the case. So yeah, he may still be in 19 range or whatever the case may be, but 19 is a completely different story from 25. So he can have a better season and be more efficient overall. But this lofty range, he's averaging career highs right now when it comes to points per game. So I can't see him continuing this rate at 25 points per game when Kawhi finally is back, if and when that happens. So for me, this is a little bit of a trick. I think LMA is going to have a better season, but not quite this good.
I think it's a little. I think it's Jekyll and Hyde. And listen, Jekyll and Hyde, the last time I remember, was a great theme for Halloween, right? So I'm gonna go trick and treat. The trickery is that it's easy for LaMarcus to be this way because there is not another alpha player on the basketball court. I think, unfortunately, when there's somebody like a Kawhi Leonard, or you know, maybe someone like a Tim Duncan, right? Any player that would be considered a 1A type player, he seems to defer. Listen, right now he's averaging 25.6 points per game. The first 2 seasons coming from Portland to San Antonio, he's averaged less than 20. When he was in Portland, Shaw, all except for the 2009-2010 season. I'm sorry, the 2007 to 2010 seasons, he was averaging just below 20. After that, over 20 points per game, easy, right? And that was even with having Damian Lillard on that basketball team. I don't know what's happened with LaMarcus Aldridge and his mindset and how he seems to acclimate himself in order to score the basketball in the way of efficiency like we always are used to seeing him do. If you're the San Antonio Spurs, you feel good about this because it gets you key wins while you don't have Kawhi Leonard on the basketball court. The question is always going to be, though, can he be, you know, Batman to Superman, right? Like, can he be the Justice League, you know what I'm saying, you know, to Superman? And if he can't be that, even when Kawhi comes back, this is all for naught, because that's exactly what the San Antonio Spurs are going to need when they're playing against teams like the Houston Rockets, when they're playing against teams like the Golden State Warriors, and they need it consistently. So right now it's good because it fills the void that the San Antonio Spurs clearly are going to have until he comes back. But whether or not he does that when Kawhi Leonard comes back, I think will be the bigger question. And I think in the long term, it will certainly re-raise those questions about his mindset playing next to another superstar basketball player in a market like San Antonio.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well too. You know, but just a lot of it is really just have to wait and see to when Kawhi gets back, and I get that. But the way his confidence level is definitely up, and you want to see that he's being a little bit more physical, even sometimes on the block, which is something I think we've always wanted to see LMA do and do consistently. As you know, he can fall in love with that, you know, that 12 to 15 footer. Now even extending out to 3 a little bit. But again, if and when Kawhi is back, does this level of production, does this level of aggressiveness stay? And history has shown me otherwise, so that's why I think it's a little bit of a trick.
All right, let's go ahead and switch gears. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, our segment of the breakdown, giving you our trick or treat segment here, the Halloween version, looking at the bigs, whether or not what they're giving you so far early this part of the season, is it trickery or is it actually a treat for the eyes to amaze? Let's go ahead and talk about Derek Favors, Shaw. You know, Gordon Hayward no longer, in Utah. Rudy Gobert is considered the man out there, but the production from Derek Favors has been nothing short of what we were hoping to see once Quinn Snyder actually started seeing those minutes and he is actually fully healthy. He's living up to the hype, but is that trickery or is it a treat?
Well, I think in the case of Favors, I think he's underwhelming for me in terms of what he was supposed to be able to do with his minutes. And as you alluded to being healthy, I really was hoping we would see Favors be putting up not necessarily double type numbers per se, but at least 15 and 8 or something along those lines. And to me he's struggling a little bit right now, and I'd want to see him be able to rebound the basketball at a higher rate, block some shots and things like that right now. So I think for me, what right now we're seeing is a little bit of a trick in terms of his limited production. In 28 minutes a night, roughly only 12 and 4 or 13 and 4 if you round things up. I think he could be better than that. So I think Favors is definitely on an upswing and should be once the season gets a little bit better. So I think we're being tricked right now about what Favors should be able to do in Utah.
Oh, deception. Oh, what a tangle web we weave when first we strive to deceive. Well, there's definitely clearly, to me, there's trickery involved, but I feel like this has been Derek Favors, where there are just these spells of Derek Favors underwhelming people. So we haven't gotten to anything that's worth treating. Like, I ain't putting any candy in his bag right now. But I will say that from a defensive perspective, he has definitely been he's been helpful in moments, in spurts. I wonder whether or not there is going to be clear cohesiveness on that floor, spacing wise, now that you have a true ball distributor in a Ricky Rubio. And it's funny too, Shaw, because you said this, back over, a couple of weeks ago with regards to Ricky Rubio, now that he is a mindset to score the basketball more, that we've seen these spells from Derek Favors when there is a ball dominant guard or a guard who has that dynamic of ball distribution, but it also has scoring capabilities, where Derek Favors has fallen out of favor to that idea. I think he wants to be around a guard that gives him the basketball, that puts him in the best position to shoot the basketball, not where he has to freelance and freestyle his way simply because he's not the primary focal point of the offense. And it'll be interesting to see how he carries himself through the course of this season, because I feel like this is why he has been traveled around the NBA in the early part of his career. Simply because he does not know how to make adjustments. And I think that is going to play a major factor from the 12.8 points per game that he's giving us right now to the potential of him somebody being a 17, 18-point type of player, just because of not just his physical presence, but all the tools that he brings to the table. But part of it is maligned because he doesn't seem to jive well with guards that don't get him the basketball, and he doesn't put himself in the best situations to assist himself to getting easy buckets because of that.
Yeah, and he's not stretchy, you know what I mean? So he's not out there shooting a bunch of threes and really from even, beyond 15 feet or so. And that's going to hurt his game a little bit, especially in today's NBA playing alongside Gobert. But he's a better straight up post player than Gobert is. But Gobert's just so long and lengthy. Like, Gobert just kind of pirouettes around the paint and kind of flings the ball up, and it ends up, rolling off the rim and into the basket, if you will, or off the glass, if you will. Favors has more direct, better post-up moves, but I don't know if he's getting the ball on a block like that, since Gobert needs so much space down there to maneuver in his own way, if you will. So for me, I'm hoping Favors in a contract year, 26 years old, is going to be a lot better than we've seen thus far today.
All right, Shaw, let's go ahead and round out our bigs in our version of the trick or treat here. Jusuf Nurkic, the big for Portland. He came over from Denver, was a immediate impact player. He certainly was the person that we were talking about. If he wasn't going to be on that basketball court in the playoffs when the Portland Trailblazers took on the Golden State Warriors, they weren't giving themselves half of a scintilla chance of being able to compete with the Golden State Warriors. He's with this basketball club. Now, this club has looked impressive already at the beginning of this season. They lost a heartbreaker to the Los Angeles Clippers, just a few days ago. But what we've seen from Nurkic, Shaw, are you treating on this, or do you feel like there's a level of trickery involved here?
Well, I think for the Blazers, they definitely expect more from him, so they hope this is definitely a trick. Because right now, I mean, not bad numbers per se, 12.6, 7.8 rebounds, one block a game, but shooting 39% from the floor. And that's very disappointing for a guy who's primarily supposed to be playing around the rim, if you will. His minutes are also down because I guess he's had some foul trouble to begin the year. But he's playing like a guy who was lost the first part of the season, like he was in Denver. Came over to Portland last year and averaged a double-double, 15 and 10. And you'd really hope that that's the center and the Nurkic that the Blazers get for the entirety of the season. So for me, I think this is a trick, but I am a little skeptical. You know what I mean? I am a little skeptical because this might be more along the lines of who he is. A lot of pressure is on him right now, but he definitely can shoot better than 39% from the floor, and definitely would like to see his rebounding get up some.
This is a treat for me, man. I love this because at least it gives us something to talk about. We can't just say that all of these guys are completely tearing up the NBA right now. It's interesting because, what's the one thing I keep talking about that's going to kill this basketball team with Portland, Shaw? Rebounding. I mean, how many bigs have they gone through on this roster? How many guys have they brought over and have moved back on? And then when they finally have someone who looks like they can actually be a solid big. I mean, the last time they had a solid big was Chris Kaman, for Christ's sake. Okay. So
Marcus Aldridge would beg your pardon.
Well, I'm talking what I'm talking about is like a legitimate guy who wants to rebound the basketball. Listen, to your point, he was giving you 15 and 10 and playing like a solid big. Like LaMarcus Aldridge played like a stretch five. That's great. Because maybe back then, that's what Terry Stotts needed from LaMarcus Aldridge. I don't know whether or not that's what Nurkic's game is supposed to grow into. What I'm saying is when you've basically given up Mason Plumlee and you've given up a few other bigs, you no longer have Festus Ezeli. You don't have anything that represents a legitimate big down in the blocks. That's going to have to be Nurkic. And 7.8 rebounds a game just ain't going to cut it. Not for this team that loves to shoot the three. So that's my biggest concern, is that if he can't contribute scoring the basketball, he's got to give you significant contributions rebounding the basketball. And if he can't give you that, especially at a 25-minute clip, that's going to be a problem for Portland. Like, they will not be able to sustain what they started doing the first few games of the season, getting what they're getting from Nurkic, and think that it's going to fly, especially in that Northwest division, where you've got the Thunder and you've got the Timberwolves and you've got the Jazz. It's not going to cut it, bro.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that an underrated or understated part of his game was his offensive rebounding. And in Portland last year, as you alluded to, because they shoot so many threes, they need somebody to be able to clean up some of those missed shots and be able to get some easy putbacks. Averaged 3.3 offensive rebounds in Portland last year, down to 1.8 so far this year. So if he can get that back up, if you will, that obviously boosts his rebounding numbers overall, but definitely help Portland with some of those missed shots and give them some second chance opportunities. And it's always easier to score on the second chance because the defense is tired of playing defense. You know what I mean? And they get demoralized once you get offensive rebounds. So Nurkic definitely has to dig in on that side of the basketball. And also, again, maybe I've seen him. He's shooting a little bit further out than I like to see him shoot right now. I think he needs to kind of get back on the block too and operate and get down and dirty because Portland does have a lot of bigs that are vying for minutes. And if he slips too far, somebody else could take his shot.
Indeed, brother. All right, coming up, we'll discuss some rookies, some guards. We'll do a little trick-or-treating on these dudes and what kind of impacts they've made so far in the early part of this season here on the Baseline NBA podcast.
Look, I want to go to the game with you, but I don't have any time to be chasing down tickets.
I got you covered, bro.
Nobody can cover me.
I meant Vivid Seats has us covered. Look, it's crazy easy to find the seat you want, and the tickets are guaranteed. Check it. You can even see a view from your seat. We'll make sure you got a wide open look at the field.
Charles, I'm always open.
Millions of tickets, 100% buyer guarantee.
Now, how you want to pay me for these tickets?
Straight cash, homie.
Find your seats at Vivid Seats.
All right, Cal Lee Warren Shaw, we are back, and it is our Halloween edition of the Baseline NBA podcast, Trick or Treat. So let's talk about a couple of guards, Shaw, that we feel like deserve a little bit of trick or treating. And I'm curious about your perspective of Darren Collinson. Not like I like to throw that name out there. I know you do. You need a punching bag. But does it surprise you, Derek Collinson, what he's been able to give you? Is it trickery or is it treats?
Well, it's definitely a treat, I think, for the Pacers. Again, same thing, early part of the season. Can he sustain this level of play? I think with somewhere in the middle. So because of their expanded pace there, I mean, these guys are going to be really running up and down the basketball floor for the entire season.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Say that again. They're going to be running up and down the basketball for who?
I mean, again, their pace is high. They're right now. The paces they're what are they? 7th in pace right now, which is shocking to me. And they haven't even had Miles Turner for the majority.
And who's coaching this basketball team?
Well, you know who it is. Our old friend Nate McMillan. Defensive minded.
Because you know, speed is his kryptonite, right?
But he's making it pop right now, at least in terms of the early results of the season. Again, as we record 5 games in, they're 2-3. And they've been pretty competitive in most of the games, and a couple nice wins, I think. And Collison has had some massive lines, and especially in the wins that he's had. So right now at 15.6 points per game and assist numbers at 8.4. Again, I think Darren Collison at 30 years old playing at this pace. I think this might be a treat that we see pretty much a majority of the season. Assists dropped down a little bit. Way up from his career averages. Way up. But I think he can definitely keep at that 15 points per game, and maybe he goes down to 7 assists a game. But I think there's more treat than trick, I think, for Collison, especially because of the situation in the end.
Well, you always love to see in a young man's game when they get older, they're like fine wine. They suddenly find their sweet spot. This could be Darren Collinson's sweet spot. It's funny because he kind of goes through these peaks and valleys through the course of his career. And whether or not this means that he can maintain that, I think it comes down to the confidence of Nick McMillan and his belief of using him in the way that he's actually out there producing for him. Now, whether or not that translates to wins, not too sure. But you like an aggressive Darren Collinson, because we've talked about how this basketball team will struggle to score the basketball if they're simply just relying on Miles Turner. So getting, around 15.6 points per game right now. The last time he averaged something close to that was back in 2014. So if you're getting that from Darren Collinson, that is a good thing. I think where you also have to start wondering is, can he maintain the amount of assists that he's racking up right now? And it's possible that he can if they're going to continue to play at this type of pace. So I believe it's more of a treat. I think the trickery is if whether or not Nate continues to run the team this way. If they do, expect Darren Collinson to continue to frighten other NBA guards, opposing guards on a nightly basis. And he will be consistently giving you that 15 and 8 for this basketball team. Whether it means wins or losses, it's still a good thing if you're talking about the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, and with him, it's always a health issue too. So 33 minutes a night, way up. I think Corey Joseph at 24 minutes a night, he could definitely cut into that. If they both kind of come to a mean, if you will, maybe 28, then yeah, obviously that's where you see Collison's numbers go down. But if he continues at this pace because he's playing so well and with this amount of minutes, I think this is definitely, like I said, it's going to be more treat than trick for Collison this year.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about another guard who, I listen. I hope they ain't scaring the bejeebus, with their play up there. Our man Kyle Lowry and the Toronto Raptors. Halloween must have came early, like in October, back in late September for him. And he hasn't shook the curse, whatever the case may be, for the Toronto Raptors. Clearly that team is being saved by the play of DeMar DeRozan. When we talk about this Toronto Raptors team, what Kyle Lowry is giving us and showing us right now, is that trick or treat?
Yeah, well, you better hope it's a trick. I think if you're the Toronto Raptors. So, at the end of the day,
abracadabra itches.
Yeah, if you have a guy now who is a multi-year All-Star and is really kind of the heart and soul of that team and drives them offensively and defensively at that point guard position, assists are right where they need to be, rebounds are right where they need to be, but his shooting is like as if he's going through the playoffs again. You know what I mean? Where he just can't buy a basket. So at 12.4 points a game as we record, that's 10 points lower than he averaged last season. He's been a 20-point per game guy the last 2 seasons, now all the way down to 12 and shooting 35% from the floor. That just cannot be the Toronto Raptors' life and Kyle Lowry's life if they want to have sustained success. So, he had a triple-double over the weekend. Kudos to him on that too, but still didn't shoot the basketball extremely well. I think this has to be a trick. And Lowry has to be better than he's been this far in the early season.
Well, clearly, to your point, it's clearly not a treat. And clearly, I think that there's some trickery involved here. I don't think that Kyle Lowry is 100% coming into this beginning of the season. So I kind of expected somewhat of a slow start for him. And I think the question becomes, is it going to be more mental or is it more physical? And I think as we continue to watch him play out the first quarter of the season, as we start nearing a little bit towards that all-star break, whether or not this trends upward for him or he just basically maintains the median. You certainly don't want this team to be solely dependent on DeMar DeRozan. But I think at the same time, you have to scrutinize a little bit about how Kyle Lowry is contributing. Now, the good thing is that the Raptors still continue to, kind of win basketball games. But this is a basketball team, Shaw, that, here again, if they don't have their legs underneath them as they start nearing the playoffs, we could be seeing Brick City all up in the north, like we did last season. And that's not going to help Kyle Lowry's effort or cause, to begin with, especially coming off of that re-signing. So, my whole concern for him is, if he's not feeling 100%, he needs to come out with that. And Dwayne Casey needs to not continue to push him out there if he can't give the effort that we're used to seeing from Kyle Lowry over the last few seasons. But if he is 100%, then I just think it's a mental block, and somebody needs to take those pins out of his voodoo doll so that he can get back to shooting those baskets the way that we've seen him do over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, again, I think that's very well said. Again, we all like Kyle Lowry, and I think he will be better. And again, this absolutely has to be a trick that he's pulling on us right now with that low points per game and definitely that low shooting percentage.
Definitely. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. Coming up, we're going to trick or treat on a couple of rookies. I'm sure that you guys are got your bags open for these two, as they have been showing us a little something so far this season here on the Baseline NBA podcast.
So we interrupt this great podcast that you're listening to. My name is Kevin Rayfuse.
I'm Tim Tompkins.
And I'm Justin Kuzart.
And we host the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
We cover every team in the league and a bunch of really fun segments like Random NBA Player, Drive and Dougal, and Hot Takes from Reddit.
So when you're done listening to this podcast, give us a search on iTunes or whatever podcast streaming app you're listening on.
We're also at driveanddishpodcast.com. We are the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. We back and ready to go here. Trick or treat in our segment of the breakdown. So let's talk about a couple of rookies, Shaw. I know you've been waiting to talk about one of them. That baller, that shot caller, Lonzo. Our man Chris Morrison for the Hoopers Log. He's got a Lonzo watch. So,
of course he does.
Yeah, of course he does, right? So, trick or treat from what we've been seeing from Lonzo. I would let me start this one, Shaw. I really have to. Because with Lonzo Ball, man, I don't know. At times I see Lonzo and then at times I see LeVar. And I'm just hoping that at some point we just see more Lonzo than we see LeVar. I'm not talking about LeVar talking. I'm talking about LeVar balling. Like, there are moments where I see Lonzo look like the number one, the number 2 pick, could essentially ascend to a number 1 pick if that was how it played out. The highly touted guard, the future of the Laker franchise and the hype machine that he is. And then there are moments, man, I'm just like, oh my God, LeVar needs to come in here and talk us through this miserable performance that we're seeing right now. So this Jekyll and Hyde thing that he got going on, man, I expected a little bit because he's a rookie, but man, when it hurts, I mean, it hurts. So, there's a little bit of treating in there, but damn, boy, there's some trickery going on, man. I don't know if he's doing it on purpose, but if he is, man, he is doing a hell of a job. I mean, not even Freddy Krueger can give you that kind of nightmare type performances we've seen a couple of games already from Lonzo.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a mixed bag, if you will, no pun intended, for him in the first 5 games or so of the season. So when I say, is this a trick or treat? It's like, okay, is Lonzo Ball going to average damn near triple-double the entire season? 10.2 points, 8.4 assists, 8.6 rebounds. That, to me, I think is a trick. I don't think his rebound is going to stay at this level, although he's very spry, and he crashes the boards very hard. And again, like a young Jason Kidd, he does all of those things. I just don't think those rebounds can stay at that number. The assists, because same thing as the case in Collison. I think because of the pace and because he's going to play so many minutes, they have him running out there 35 minutes a night right now. I think that's going to stay. So this is definitely a middle ground, if you will, of trick and treat.
But you know what, Shaw? And here's the thing. you brought up a very interesting point. Here's where I feel like that in itself, when we talk about the triple-double, I feel that there's a level of trickery. Let's just keep this 100, man. Russell Westbrook has killed the majestic feel of the triple-double, okay? Triple-doubles are great. They're wonderful. I think when you don't see him as often from a LeBron James because his physical stature demands triple-doubles, the awe of what Russell Westbrook was doing as a point guard reminded us so much of what Jason Kidd had given us, in spur moments at times, that we said, wow, what it would be like to see a guard that can shoot and average 10 and rebound 10 and dish out 10 per night. You know what I'm saying? That's all well and good. But in most cases, we often talk about this, and I think we even had this with Coach Nick from B-Ball Breakdown when we talked about Lance Stevenson and when he'd get you triple-doubles. He's like, sometimes, man, these triple-doubles, they basically have their weight as a Cuban zirconia, right? And that's what I worry about when we're talking about Lonzo Ball, that the hype about him being a triple-double machine, like in this NBA, what does that really mean? What does that manifest when we're talking about a team like the Los Angeles Lakers? And that to me could be something considered as a trickery. So I agree with you that I don't see him sustaining it, but I just feel like people need to kind of take a step back on this whole phenomenon about him being a triple-double machine, because for all of his efforts, that could mean absolutely nothing in the context of the Los Angeles Lakers being a successful basketball team if Lonzo Ball's triple-doubles don't equate to wins.
Right. Well, and he doesn't have one as of yet. I think he's come close, and again, the numbers are just averaging out to be damn near that. Again, 10, 8, and 8 is amazing across the board. But take into account his shooting percentage, 31 from the floor, 23% from the 3-point line, and he's taking 5 threes a game. That's atrocious. So there's a lot of improvement that needs to happen there, I think, when in the case of Lonzo Ball. So I think his overall numbers are definitely a trick, I think, in terms of his rebounding, but you'd hope that his shooting is a trick as well too, and that could get a little bit better. So again, middle ground with Lonzo here for the early part of the season.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I'm not trying to come down on Lonzo Ball and saying, oh, his numbers don't mean anything. What I'm saying is when I look at a triple-double from Giannis Antetokounmpo and I look at a triple-double from Lonzo Ball, Giannis's triple-doubles seem to have more of an impact right now than what I'm seeing from Lonzo Ball. And the fact that Lonzo Ball is by all stretch of the standards and what we've all been hyping him out to be, is supposed to be the best basketball player on that court for the Los Angeles Lakers. So essentially, when he gets you triple-doubles, it's supposed to mean something. And I'm just saying that the only time that it means something is when he's scoring 20-plus points per game, because I don't know if the assists and the rebounds are equating to something that's telling us that it means something to the Los Angeles Lakers and whether or not they win basketball games. So I'm just saying, people, slow your roll a little bit. It's great to see that he's getting close to that, but whether or not he's achieving it and it's having an impact on the Lakers actually doing something while he's doing it, that to me is the part that can seem a little bit of trickery. Let's go ahead and switch gears, Sean, talk about that last rookie that we've been talking about here, and that's that boy Ben Simmons. We said it, right? Ben Simmons, we were kind of on that bandwagon and said, look, it's hard-pressed not to think that this kid's going to be the rookie of the year. And he ain't wasting any time about waiting for people to make this argument and debate about whether or not it should be Ben Simmons and Lonzo, Ben Simmons and Dennis Smith Jr., Ben Simmons and whoever else in the, Jason Tatum and them boys. It's all about Ben. Ben is the new Franklin in Philadelphia right now.
I like how you put that. Ben Simmons is he's running away, I think, with the early part of the season in terms of how impressed I am with any rookie out there. 16 points per game, 10 rebounds, 7.4 assists. I'm shooting 47% from the floor. Not shooting threes like that, so it's not his game. He understands that. I think in terms of the minutes played, he's definitely making his teammate Joel Embiid a little bit jelly, because Embiid wants to be out there 35 minutes a night and playing back-to-back and not having to worry about anything, but his reality is a little bit different. Simmons, for me, I think this is definitely a treat, and I think it's something that we're going to be treated to all season long. Yeah, maybe his percentages go down a little bit per se, so does he come into the 14 points per game range? That's possible. But I think right now he has it full throttle, playing point guard position, point forward, if you will. And I love his game, and I think he's going to be doing this pretty much all season long.
This kid is a monster, and I'm just wondering whether or not we're going to see Brett Brown really confide in Ben Simmons to take more of a proactive role in establishing himself through Joel Embiid. I think that there's more of that because these are young guys and we got to, kind of coach them up. And, yeah, it's the one thing that I tend to hate about organizations when you have such a young roster. They always apply the Java rules to some of these guys. And I think that that just compromises their confidence about their eagerness to be out there and play basketball. Let these guys go, man. I'm not saying let them be reckless, but let these guys go. Because what we're getting from Ben Simmons should mean that this Philadelphia 76ers team really should be better than, 1 or 2 wins so far this season. Now, I get it. It's early. And to your point, we talked about this where my concern is that there were games that they should have won, but their schedule was a difficult schedule so far. But what I'm saying is that these are those type of numbers that I'm seeing from Ben Simmons that if they were on Lonzo's Lakers team, I think the Lakers would have had some of those wins as well, too. So that's how much of an impact that I'm already seeing from Ben Simmons. I'm not saying that Ben Simmons is all world, but he is playing like he is all world. And that should mean something for a Sixers team, like I said, that has expectations to win in a weak Eastern Conference. Ultimately, I hope that it starts shaking out where it's making a bigger impact with star players like Embiid, with guys like Covington, with guys like Redick. And I think the sooner that they recognize that Brett Brown recognizes it, the better off the Philadelphia 76ers are going to be. They need to write that declaration for Ben Simmons out there in the city of brotherly love.
When we said it to begin the year, I think you had asked me directly, for Philly to have playoff aspirations, what needs to happen. And obviously Embiid's health is first and foremost, but they need Simmons to play at the level that he's playing at. And, he's delivering the early part of the season. Not quite the win total that Philly would have hoped as of yet, but I think they're going to get there and get through some of their early season struggles.
All right, well, there you have it. Kind of enjoyed. This is the first time in a long, long time, probably since I was a kid, that I actually have enjoyed trick-or-treating. I think we need to do this a little bit more often when we get into some of these prospects and what they've been showing us so far in the early part of the 2017-18 campaign. Jahlil, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and this was The Breakdown. Jahlil, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA Podcast. Time now for the drop. And topic of conversation is in reference to 2 specific players right now who have been in the Lions' den, and on the trading block. And it's just amazing because these are guys that in their own right has had high accolades, and this could probably be the lowest points right now in their careers. One in their early career. I mean, their careers barely have even started. And another. It's just kind of weird how it's played out. And I'm talking about Eric Bledsoe and Jahlil Okafor. Now, Jahlil Okafor, we've always said, man, that, even though he got, drafted by the Philadelphia 76ers, his off-the-court issues, his immaturity, I often felt like was a hindrance to his progression to be one of those formidable bigs that everybody had expected him to be in the NBA. There's no question about his physical skill set and his tools. It's just that it's the tools up in his head that just doesn't seem to click right when it needs to. And already now there's speculation about him being put on the trading block. As for Eric Bledsoe, you could just tell that this guy felt like the worst mistake he ever made was leaving Los Angeles and wound up being in Phoenix. And so when you look at both of these situations, Shaw, to your point, and you mentioned this, you're like, yo, man, these guys, they need new destinations. They need to pack their bags and they need to find, more calmer grounds than where they are right now.
Yeah, and I think in the case of Okafor, I'll start there. This has just been, it seems like ever since his rookie season has been kind of in the making. They soured on him so quickly that it doesn't really make sense to me. So fact of the whole fiasco, they had to deal with Chicago done last year, and then that didn't happen. Then over the summer, hey, we need to move him by the draft. The draft didn't happen. All right, we'll move him before training camp. That didn't happen. Well, now we'll keep him because we're not sure if Embiid is healthy, and now he's kind of out of the rotation again. Just stop jerking this guy around, dude. Like, enough already. Find a trade partner, get him up out of there. I think there are teams that will, again, you're not going to get exactly what you want from him at this point, but it's more of a distraction. I think at this point, and that they need to get rid of him one way or the other. So a couple teams out there you can think, depending on what do you want his role to be, right? And the problem here I think is certain teams don't align because they're clearly tanking. So does Chicago now take a chance on him, knowing that they're clearly tanking? But they would have to probably get rid of a guy like Robin Lopez, and then maybe they try to build around a young core with Okafor and Zach LaVine and things of that nature. You could try to make an argument for Milwaukee. They're not tanking, but do they have enough assets in essence that Philly would want back? Do they have anybody there that he could go there next? But then does he go there and then he stunt the growth of a guy like Thon Maker? So for me, like the window is a little bit tight in terms of Okafor because especially of how the game is trending. We all know he's not stretchy, if you will. But I do feel like there are teams out there that could definitely use his services if Philly would just maybe come off the asking price a little bit.
I don't know how a guy who started his rookie season at 17.5 points per game is now in his third season. He's averaging 10. 17.5 points per game puts you in as a 1A, 1B type player on a roster, ultimately, for some of these other maligned basketball teams. And for the Philadelphia 76ers, they were literally one of the worst basketball teams that year. So to go from someone who was one of your primary scorers on the basketball team to ultimately being someone that is scrapping for minutes, I think says more about where they are with that player, to your point, Shaw. But I also I've also said, too, that I think it also says something about the player. And I think that's the reason why it's hard to move this guy, because I think for most of these other teams, they don't know what they're getting with Jahlil Okafor.
I look at a guy like, not saying that he's who's going to be, but Zach Randolph had a lot of trouble to begin his career as well, too. And then looked into the great pro and the overall numbers, a 2010 guy that he became. I think Okafor, again, maybe not 2010, but definitely, like you said, 17-8, 17-9 as an option 2 on a roster, and maybe not a great option 2, but even so, maybe even as a third option, the guys who who's going to go down there and get you some points in the bucket. I mean, put some points in the paint. So for me, again, there are a couple teams out there, but the situation just becomes a little tenuous because some teams are clearly tanking, so they don't want to give up anything for somebody that could maybe even help them, and that just depends how much faith you have in Okafor.
All right, Chalk, let's quickly talk about Eric Bledsoe, because I know that's a hot button topic. It's funny, man. I really had a lot of respect for Eric Bledsoe when he was playing for the Los Angeles Clippers. And even when he was playing for the Phoenix Suns, even though he disappeared because the market just has not merited it, the Phoenix Suns have not been a good basketball team for a number of years. This whole scenario with Eric Bledsoe really it came out and played itself out in a weird way. You can definitely check all the circulars about what happened with Eric Bledsoe and how the team is soured on him. I just think it's more on Eric Bledsoe that at this particular juncture in his career, similar to what we're talking about with Jahlil Okafor, except he's not 22 years old. Eric Bledsoe was a grown man and an NBA veteran, and to do what he did, it hurts what he is capable of really giving other teams, because you're asking for what his play can give you alongside his veteranship, and it seems like he has compromised his veteranship that might actually hurt what he may be worth on the market.
Yeah, well, doing the tweet and then Phoenix sending him home like he was a child, or what the case may be, that definitely is hurting his trade value to some degree. But now Bobby Marks from ESPN is reporting that they're just asking a crap ton in return for Bledsoe that they're just probably not going to get. And now other stipulations are surfacing that they're trying to attach Tyson Chandler's contract to that as well too. And again, Chandler I think can definitely help a team and help a roster. But that's a lot of salary that makes the trade extremely more difficult to make with Bledsoe and Chandler being packaged together in a deal. That may require second and third teams, to get involved in any type of situation. But teams that seem to be most interested are Milwaukee. They're not sure if they're quite interested in giving up Malcolm Brogdon for 2 years of Bledsoe, and then maybe Chandler if they were to throw that in there. And then the Denver Nuggets too, who are finding out that maybe neither one of their point guards are that good in terms of Jamal Murray and Emmanuel Mudiay. I think Bledsoe in Denver would be killer. Can bolster that defense, contribute to that offense as well too, as Denver is a little bit struggling, I think, at this point in the season. I like that situation for them, as well as the situation as Milwaukee as well. Other teams linked to them are the Knicks and things like that too, but the Knicks aren't going to take on somebody who can ruin their tanking chances.
I really would like to see the Detroit Pistons put themselves in the mix. How about a Bledsoe combination with Andre Drummond and Tobias Harris? That would be a nice That would be a
there's
nice
no
play.
way Phoenix is taking on Reggie Jackson. And I think that's a great scenario. Would be a great, but
right. No, but that's what I'm saying. I would like to see the Detroit Pistons put themselves in the mix. I'm not saying that they would be successful. I think that there are other teams that probably can offer more, but it would be an ideal situation to see Bledsoe play in that scenario. I think that would be a better fit for the Detroit Pistons and Stan Van Gundy and what he wants to do with that basketball team than what he's getting from Reggie Jackson. So it'll be interesting to see how these two scenarios play themselves out. We hope these guys do, to your point, Shaw, find better destinations than clearly the circumstances that they're in right now. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time to go coast to coast, discussing the news of the association. Ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Let's ride.
All right. 49% of the Brooklyn Nets, who have a winning record right now, crazy, right, is being taken over by Joseph Tsai of Alibaba, co-founder of Alibaba. Are you feeling this move for the Brooklyn Nets?
Hey, man, Brooklyn may be heading in another direction, and I think the way that they're going with their general manager and coaching seems to be a positive one. So new direction, new owner. Things are looking up in Brooklyn, I'd say. All
right, out in Boston, the Celtics have been granted an $8.4 million disabled player exception to the situation with Gordon Hayward. Good or bad? Well, not so much bad, but this clearly is a good thing for the Celtics, especially when they get towards a trade deadline, if they want to try and make some type of move to supplement this team in their mix, right?
Yeah, I think they're going to wait till the very bitter end of this. They don't have to use it until March 10th, so trade deadline, buyout season, the whole nine. All that will occur before then. I don't think they're going to add anybody to the roster before that time.
All right. Out in Chicago, Nikola Mirotic may be inviting a trade. Don't blame him if he can't even sit in the same locker room with Bobby Portis. If I'm Nikola Mirotic, I want out in Chicago for all the reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
And his well-being.
Yeah, and then the fact that the Bulls just, they exercise the option on Bobby Portis and everything like that too. So, I guess the Bulls have to keep all their options open, but I think Mirotic is just like, listen, you know what? This is probably just not a marriage that is gonna continue to last. Why not get up out of here? Unfortunately, though, he can't be traded until January 15th because he just signed a new deal. So we're going to have to kind of wait this out a little bit, but Mirotic definitely may be on the block.
All right. And finally, Shaw, Tony Parker is rehabbing in the G League. This is a welcome sign for the San Antonio Spurs to have Tony P out there rehabbing.
Yes, sir. And I think Parker joked a little bit like, hey, if anybody hurts them down there, Pop is going to have their neck. Maybe put him in the Terrence Ross lock, if you will. So, Parker's definitely trying to get in.
The pop lock, that's what it is.
On his way back. The pop lock. So hopefully Parker's back out there, but DeJounte Murray is doing a great job in his absence. So we'll be interested to see if they end up in a timeshare once Parker's back fully healthy.
All right. Well, there you have it. Going through the news in the association, Callie, Warren, Shaw, in our segment of Coast to Coast. Once again, awesome show, Shaw. Woo! Trick or treat, man. We were all up in that bag, brother.
Absolutely. And I hope our listeners enjoyed it. Make sure you give us some feedback. Let us know what your thoughts are. Especially on the trick or treat segment. And what are some other guys we might have missed, think are can probably go either way of the trick or treat situation. So hit us up at NBA Baseline on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram, NBA_Baseline on Instagram. And hit me up at Shots with the NBA. And of course, my homie, the man, the host of the show at Game Face Lee on Twitter, bro. So as always, great show, homie.
Definitely. So for the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. We'll catch up with you next time.